Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Alien Protocols. So, it's incredibly likely that I have been suffering with the COVID-19 for a little over 3 weeks, or around 3 weeks right now. And a nurse also said it was like a 95% chance. And I couldn't get tested. It's very difficult to get tested here in New York, in the Bronx, and they really prioritize it appropriately around healthcare workers and people who are very, very ill. And I guess first of all, I'll describe my symptoms, and then I'll describe how things are in the Bronx. This illness has been unlike anything I've ever experienced. It has some very bizarre symptoms that are very unique to it. Things like I lost my sense of taste and smell. Like a hamburger, I couldn't smell it. I couldn't taste it. It was like tofu without any taste. And same thing with coffee and a few other things. And that lasted for a few days, and it's mostly come back now. After the first week, it was kind of like the eye of a hurricane. I felt fine. I thought I was okay. In fact, I think I shot one of the previous videos during that period. And you can see I look pretty good and I sound pretty good. And then the other side of the hurricane hit. And my fever raced up to 102.5, I think it was, when I was able to get it measured. And I had horrible chills and incredible weakness. And you're so weak that you don't want to speak. You almost can't speak. And everything is a drain. So I didn't speak to so many of my friends and people who sent me messages and wanted me to respond. So I apologize to all of you who have cared so much about our friendships that I didn't communicate. But it's a part of this really evil bug. Another aspect of it, and something I experienced several times, was incredibly vivid, detailed, and remembered dreams. The first one I had, I was at a fair in the 1800s. And it was so vivid and cool, and people were dressed in their best clothing. The women were dressed in their best, and the men were dressed in their best, most of them, except for some people who were competing with animals and things like that. And I learned all sorts of stuff while in that dream. Like I was asking a lady, is it normal that everyone dresses in their best? And, she was like, oh, of course, and, explained why. And, of course, there was no electricity at the fair, and I got to see all sorts of different things they were doing in that time period to entertain crowds. There was a guy who would do these jumping from barrel to barrel things. They also had a guy who was insulting the crowd, and you could throw different vegetables at him. And just a lot of really interesting details that I remembered from that. It was so vivid. Then I've had a couple really, really vivid dreams. And also something that's associated with this bug is delirium. And there were several times where at one point I woke up at the hotel and there was a blackout at the hotel. This was the night where my fever broke for the second time. And the power was out in the building. And I was so discombobulated. I was like, where am I? What's going on? I didn't know if I was asleep or awake. And I lost things like object permanence. Like I'd try to grab something and it wasn't there anymore. And and I'd find it, in another bizarre place, or things would appear, and it was because my mind wasn't thinking right. And apparently, something that they're studying now is the possibility that it causes strokes and swelling of the brain and other things. So it's conceivable I even had that. So many bizarre symptoms, but weakness was one of the real big, strong ones for me. Right now, I'm very weak still. I still have chills, but most of the bug has left. The worst aspects of it have left. My high fever. But I've been cautioned that this can be over a month. So I have to really take it easy and kind of spoil myself. But hopefully I'll come out on the other side with immunity, which would be wonderful for a healer in the Bronx, which is the epicenter of the epicenter. There's no doubt that the Bronx is the worst area in the New York area. And, let me transition to how things are going in the Bronx. It's very, very bizarre. The stores are closed. So many stores are closed. You just see streets that used to be packed with people, and really cool little stores of all sorts of different kinds. Now they're just a couple people. All the stores are closed. The stores that are open are price gouging, some of them. Literally, things are double the normal price. There are military copters going over all the time. And I suspect that there's all sorts of varieties of surveillance going on at different electromagnetic spectrum possibilities, just as a form of monitoring. The people in the Bronx are very colorful people, and in some ways it's like living in Mad Max, the movie Mad Max, because they're wearing big goggles and crazy mouthpieces and driving crazy cars, and it just seems like super Mad Max. But there's been a lot of other wonderful things, too, about being in the Bronx. People reaching out to help each other, thinking about what's important, reanalyzing their lives. And I've seen a lot of coverage lately in the news about African Americans, blacks having a higher percentage of fatality, and also, different minorities. And the news almost makes it sound like there's a biological deficiency in these people that allow them to, they've got more cases of diabetes and asthma and all these different things. And to me, I believe it has nothing to do with biology, and has everything to do with racism and economics. These communities, and communities like the Bronx, you don't get all the fresh vegetables and fruits you get in other areas. In these impoverished areas, you don't get all the other things that other areas get. And the systemic racism and economic disparity is the real core problem. It's not a deficiency in any human being. The asthma and all these other aspects are, I believe, conditions of the environment and the economic realities of these areas. And I have a strong suspicion, if you look in very impoverished white areas that have been consistently so for long periods of time, you will see the same exact physical impairments that lead to higher fatality rates. So, to me, the Bronx is so wonderfully multiracial. We all really come together and care about each other. And You know, I might not have made it if it wasn't for my dear buddy Sam, who put me up at a hotel for quite a few days, which allowed me to just concentrate on getting physically and mentally better. And several of you sent in donations over this time, and I just can't thank you enough, because I've been so debilitated since like maybe March 21st, somewhere around there. And it's an incredibly long kind of a bug. And I'm hopeful that I will have immunity and will be able to go out into the areas and touch people for healings and work with people who are at a financial and health disadvantage. Right now, you can't go to the hospitals and get regular treatment for things. So, you know, in many ways, this bug, this pandemic, which other scientists have said could be an expression of nature kind of lashing out at us. Nature receiving so much damage and suppression that things like pandemics are more likely. When you cut deeper into the rainforest and you get these creatures that were more isolated now in closer contact with societies, all sorts of things can happen. And we are in a great extinction already. And if you look at past extinctions, there's oftentimes a tapestry, a dynamic interweaving of several disasters that cause the final push to full extinction. And this certainly is not going to be the last pandemic. This is going to be around until there's a vaccine, but that won't even work for everybody. Not everyone will be able to get a vaccine. You know, in the Bronx, fortunately, the Ebola will most likely kill the COVID. So, and then the homeless urine will kill all of them. So, I think this is something that we can, as a group, come together and with love and empathy battle this virus and uplift each other. There's something very well studied called the Maharishi effect. And that is when groups of people concentrate and pray and meditate over a city or an area, that they can dynamically affect the crime rates, the health of people, and much more. And this has been studied by many different independent groups and very well documented using some of the highest scientific standards. So I urge you to meditate about the healing of the people and the waning of the disease, the disappearing of it, the weakening of the disease. And pray for the different cities and the people. And I urge you to be strong in spirit, strong in character. And it's easy to get depressed being isolated and in these places. But know that you're not isolated, that there is a substructure underneath this reality that allows us to connect to any place, any time. And you don't really truly understand how amazing and vividly real it is unless you experience it. And when you know that, the top science groups from MIT to Stanford University to the CIA have believed in these abilities and known that they are real, you should too. So I'm going to really try and take it easy for the next week until this bug is completely gone from my system. I'm just feeling really weak right now even. So I'm going to end the video, but I love you guys, and I am so thankful for so much. And when I get a little bit better, I'm going to be out there on the streets working with people, and you'll see some very interesting videos coming up soon. Much love to all.